Have you ever wondered how a small idea can eventually become a company worth $1 billion? Companies like Airbnb, Uber, Canva, and many other successful startups started with something much smaller. They started by identifying a problem. A startup journey usually doesn't begin with the question, how can I make a lot of money? It begins with much more important question. What problem can I solve? Imagine students struggling to find affordable transportations to college. If someone notices this problem and creates a convenient solution, that solution could become the foundation of a startup. But having an idea is not enough. The problem must be real and people must actually care about solving it. Founders need to understand their customers. They talk to people, ask questions, observe their behavior, and find out how they currently deal with the problem. This process helps founders understand whether their idea has real potential. For example, if people are already spending a lot of money, time, or effort trying to solve a particular problem, that could be a strong opportunity. But if nobody cares about the problem, even the most advanced product may fail. So, the first step in the startup journey is simple: find a real problem, understand the people facing it, and identify a better way to solve it. Once the problem is clear, the next challenge is turning the idea into something people can actually use, and that's where the MVP comes in. Next one is building the MVP. Once a startup identifies a real problem, the next step is to create a solution. But here's something many new entrepreneurs get wrong. They try to build a perfect product immediately. They add too many features, spend too much money, and take months or even years before showing the product to customers. Startups usually takes a different approach. They build an MVP, minimum viable product. An MVP is the simplest version of a product that solves the main customer problem. Imagine you want to create a food delivery platform. You don't need thousands of restaurants, advanced AI recommendations, loyalty programs, and a complicated application on on a day one. You could start with a simple website, a few restaurants, and one delivery area. The goal is not perfection, the goal is learning. Once the MVP is launched, customers start using it. Their behavior and feedback provide valuable information. Maybe customers love one feature but completely ignore another. Maybe they want a different pricing model. Maybe they discover a problem the founders never considered. The startup can use this information to improve the product. Sometimes the feedback is so significant that the founders completely change their original idea. This is called a pivot. A pivot doesn't necessarily mean failure. It can mean that the startup has learned something valuable from the market. The important thing is to test assumptions quickly instead of spending huge amounts of time and money based only on guesses. Once a startup has a product that people genuinely want, the next question is, how do we grow? And that's where the real startup journey begins. Getting the first customers. Now, the startup has something important, a working product. But having a product doesn't automatically make a company successful. The startup needs customers, and more importantly, it needs customers who actually find value in the product. This is where founders begin testing something called product market fit. A product market fit means that a product satisfies a strong need in a particular market. Imagine an app that gets 10,000 downloads but almost nobody uses it after the first day. That doesn't necessarily mean the startup is successful. Now imagine another app with only 1,000 users but those users keep coming back, recommend it to others, and are willing to pay for it. That could be a much stronger sign of a product market fit. Startups measure things like customer retention, revenue, engagement, referrals, and feedback to understand whether their product is actually working. Once they find a product that customers genuinely want, the startup can thinking about scaling. But scaling requires sources. The company may need developers, marketers, salespeople, better technology, and more infrastructures. This is where startup funding can become more important. Founders may approach investors and explain their product, customers, market opportunity, and growth potential. If investors believe the startup can become much more bigger, they may invest money in exchange for a percentage of ownership. That funding can help the startup expand faster. And this is the foundation of the journey from a small startup to a high growth company. But funding alone doesn't create a unicorn. The company needs the customer's strong growth, a scalable business model, and the ability to compete in a large market. So, in our next video, we will explore how startups use funding and scaling to move from thousands of customers to millions, and eventually get closer to becoming a unicorn.